Hello and welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Jacob, and this is episode 130. Welcome. We're glad you're here, and we hope you're finding success in recovery from Kratom. This week on the show, one of my co-hosts, Libby, had the opportunity to chat with Kendall. It's a great discussion regarding their Kratom addiction and recovery, and we're excited for you to hear it. This week, I am doing this intro solo, and I wanted to cover a topic that's been on my mind for a little while, and that topic is recovery terminology, navigating it, and what does it all mean. So, essentially, there's a lot of words in recovery that get thrown around, one of them even being recovery, so words like sobriety, clean, kratom-free, abstinence, medication-assisted treatment, all these different terms, and they can mean different things to different people, and they can often even lead to disagreements and arguments about someone's status in recovery. So, what I really wanted to convey on this topic is these terms can mean different things to different people, and it can be challenging to, one, navigate the space, and two, not get caught up in someone else's definition of what recovery means to you. What I mean by that is there are some people that will say if you're, using medicated assisted treatment, for example, that you're not clean or you're not sober. There are others that will defend to the ends of the earth that you are sober. There are probably others that are somewhere in the middle. There are people who consider abstinence from kratom, but drinking alcohol and, recreationally, not in a problematic way, or, using a little bit of cannabis to be sober for them. There are other people that may use medical marijuana and use the term California sober, and to them, that's sober. And at one point, I think Charlie coined the term Florida sober for individuals that might be using kratom as some form of maintenance drug, just for a little comic relief there. All right, so why is this important? What does it all mean? Well, I think the most important thing is when you're thinking about recovery and the terminology around recovery and how it applies to you is don't get hung up on the words. Don't get hung up on if you're meeting someone else's definition of sobriety or recovery. Recovery is about you. It's individual. It's about leaning on this community of people that are here to help you, but doing it so your life improves, so you can be there for your friends and family, so you can mend your relationships, so you can have financial stability. And how you achieve that can be very different. For some people, it's going to meetings and complete abstinence. For others, it's meetings, medicated assisted treatment, seeing a therapist. For others, it might just be being completely clean and sober and not using any substances, but not going to meetings. So all of these paths are valid paths, and they're different paths. I think it's just most important to think about it this way. If you're moving in a direction that is positive for your life, if you're no longer dependent and taking kratom on a daily basis at all, you're abstinent from kratom, you're not using drugs or alcohol, to me, you're sober. I also consider people using medicated assisted treatment and not using other drugs or alcohol to be sober. I probably also would consider, even though I don't use cannabis and I never really found it problematic, but I know other people have. But if someone's using that and they were a hardcore alcoholic or heroin addict or kratom addict and, they use that, but it helps them and they're not physically dependent on it and they could put it down, who am I to say they're not sober? Who am I to judge their path and the way they've been able to recover? So really just what I wanted to kind of convey with this intro is don't worry about the terminology. It's important to get healthy, to mend your relationships, to be an all-around better person and to recover. But how you recover and what your definition of recovery is, that's up to you. And it's important that you're focused on your goals that get you to where you want to be with your recovery. All right, with that, I think we can get on to Libby's interview with Kendall and keep it kratom free, everybody.
Kratom Quitters. This is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Libby, and today I'm here with Kendall. Kendall, how's it going? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners? Any way you might introduce yourself to someone on the street or anything that's important to you?
Yeah. So my name's Kendall. I live in the Phoenix area. I've lived here my whole life. I'm a middle school social studies teacher. And as ironic as it is, I'm pretty introverted and I teach social studies. So yeah.
That is ironic. How long have you been teaching?
7 years now.
You must really like it.
I do. I enjoy it so much. And it's always for the pay and, the great pay that we teachers get.
Of course. Yeah, the pay is great, I hear. Any hobbies that you like that you're interested in?
So I drank the Kool-Aid recently and have started playing pickleball.
I knew you were going to say pickleball. I knew it.
Yeah. I think my mom has been trying to get me and my wife to play for a few years now. And then we finally started and we just went last night and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, other than that, love watching movies. About 5 years ago, got into oil painting and, just after a few Bob Ross videos, like it is true, like really anyone can paint. So, yeah.
Good to know. It's been calling me, so it's good to hear.
You got to act on it then.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, we'll get into it. Tell me about how you were first introduced to Kratom.
Okay, so I was first introduced to Kratom. I feel like I have connected this way with many other people that you guys have interviewed. It was at a gas station when I first saw it. I had actually heard the name of it before, but I did not make the connection until a few weeks later. But I'm at a gas station. I see the 5-hour energies, and there's just this other stuff right next to it. And I'm not going to say the brand name, but the catchphrase or whatever you want to call it on it, it's like chill, relax, take a load off, however you want to say it. And I was like, okay, that actually kind of sounds nice. So I tried it. It was absolutely disgusting, almost threw up. I didn't, though. I guess a lot of people for their first time actually do. But about 20 minutes later, I feel the effects and I was like, okay, this is actually kind of nice. So yeah.
Okay. Had you ever had any problems with substances before that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So probably 5 years before that, I had some back issues. This stems from a 2-year mission that I served for my church. So I kind of dealt with the pain for a few years, tried exercising, went to different doctors and physical therapies. And it just hit a certain point where it was just kind of unbearable. And I got in contact with someone in Mexico who would actually send me painkillers. So tramadol would probably be my drug of choice. Even that was kind of deceiving because, I had heard that tramadol is a non-addictive opioid, which, I feel like with all the shows and documentaries that have been coming out, it's like, there's really no such thing.
Yeah, that sounds like an oxymoron to me.
Oxymoron about Oxycontin.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So yeah, that was an issue for a few years. I hid that, or at least I tried to. Back in 2017, I came clean about it to my wife. I went to one meeting, one NA meeting, and that was it. I thought I was good. And I actually did pretty well for a while after that because I had just started my teaching career. Did pretty well for a while. That's when the Kratom came into play, probably 1.5 years later.
So you got clean off of tramadol and went to one meeting and didn't need no other supportive recovery stuff going on?
I think this is where I'm probably going to distinguish a little bit from other people, but yeah, like I went to one meeting, and I'm not even saying that the one meeting, it cured all. Maybe if anything, it scared me. It's like, okay, well, I have these other good things going on in my life. I'm going to thrive off that. But then, even after a while, like as human beings, we habituate to things, we get into a routine, and then that got old. And then, the discovery of this Kratom came into play, and yeah, it just kind of started up again.
Okay, so tell me about the trajectory with that. So you find it at the gas station and you consume it, you throw up, and then you're like, okay, this is kind of nice. And then what happens next?
And then it was very slow. It was a very slow progression. So I tried it, and then maybe once a week, every 2 weeks sometimes, for probably about 9 months. Okay, so 9 months hits, and I actually think there was probably over the summer 2020, because I discovered it in January or February of 2020. Later on in that summer, I'm working, and that's when I realized there wasn't quite a routine yet, because it was just it just depended on when.
Sporadic. It was pretty sporadic for you.
Thank you, sporadic.
Yeah.
So when November comes around, it was actually Thanksgiving Day. We're trying to get all this stuff ready, have family Thanksgiving, and I'm pretty stressed out. And I had noticed it before, but the packs of 2 capsules, the extracts, and those were 500 milligrams each. And I actually took both at the same time, which you're not supposed to do. I think I was in the bathroom for 10, 15 minutes, just like on the floor, trying to stay awake, trying to wake myself up, trying to act normal. And then it had been another few weeks after that. I had sprained my ankle, and a few days later, getting that treated and wearing a boot, we were trying to get some stuff ready in our house. And I was in a lot of pain. And that was the first time where I thought of taking kratom for pain. And after that was when it was buying the capsules every other day to every day for a while, for a few years, actually.
Okay, so you were using those like extract capsules after injuring your foot constantly every day?
Yeah, basically daily. Maybe there were like very small periods of time where it was every few days or every other day.
Did your wife know what was going on?
No, not at the time.
No one knew?
No one knew. And that has been the biggest issue. And probably what I've had to work through the most is coming out of this isolation, being so isolated with this secret for so long, and all the shame and guilt that came with it. Just overcoming that has basically been my challenge.
Yeah, I think so many of us addicts can relate to that. I know I certainly can. I don't know. I've been skilled at keeping things a secret, and that comes with its own risks of like, well, you're not hurting anyone else, but then you're holding all the things by yourself. And so
you learn to become such a great liar and deceiver, like hiding places and for your stuff. And yeah,
you're not alone in that. So what was the tipping point where you were like, okay, this is out of hand?
So that's more complicated, because I feel like there were actually a few times where, my wife would look at our bank account, be like, hey, what is going on? Why are you spending $20 to $30 a day at gas stations? And I tried to explain it a few times. I was like, there's this stuff, it's called kratom. They're like these little shots. And then she was honestly just so upset about the money being spent, where it's like, okay, well, you need to stop. And I was like, okay. And, once she finally like read into it and did some research, we were all on the same page. Like, okay, it's almost like how it was like when you were on tramadol. This is a habit, obviously, and there's some addiction happening. So once we were on the same page, that was where it became known, started being open about it with I have 4 brothers. And then my parents. And so they were all aware. That's where I knew it was a problem. I mean, I knew it was a problem all along, but the tipping point was over this last summer. I needed to stop. My parents were aware. They were going to help me get off it. And what makes it complicated is that I was so overwhelmed by all the love. It's ironic. All the love and support that I got from my family. They were sending me articles. They were sending me podcasts. They were sending me all this stuff. And I didn't know where to start. And so I actually did. And it was the longest stretch I had for, I think, probably since I started kratom back in 2020. I went without it for about 3.5 weeks. So regardless of all the overstimulation and all the overwhelming info I had been given, 3.5 weeks without it. I tried another one of those, and I forgot to mention before, I had started using the kava-kratom tonics, the glass bottles that I won't say the name, but if anything, you feel trapped with those things. And I tried one and I was back on it. It was sporadic again, probably once a week, if anything, maybe a couple weeks. And that was up until November. So November comes around. It's actually Thanksgiving. It's weird because it's almost like Thanksgiving's like the day where I started it and then stopped. So just 5 years later, my wife finds out again. And the part for me where, and today actually marks 90 days without it.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just sick and tired of the lying, of the hiding. And I just decided that I was going to be brutally honest. That just felt different, and it almost immediately felt better.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what started me off. The pink cloud phase that I've been hearing about is very much real because I thrived off of that feeling. I was really going off of that. And, a few weeks into it, I started getting, cravings again. And that's where I had to pick up the phone and either call my dad or talk to my wife and just be open about how I was feeling and try some other things. And so far, 90 days into it, it's been good.
Excellent. Congratulations. 90 days is notable. So good job.
Thank you.
So you were using the extract capsules,
Yep.
And then you made like a 3.5 week break. How did you do that? I'm curious about like at which point did you know that you were going to be experiencing withdrawal, and if there was like any way you combated that and the journey on that one?
So like just getting through the withdrawals.
Yeah, like I'm curious if there was a moment in the usage where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through withdrawals. Like I'm sick when I don't take these, what that realization was like.
So because I had already gone through, and I know this is different for everybody, just again, I know you guys have had over 100 guests on here that you've interviewed. So for me, I feel lucky when it came to kratom withdrawals because it was not nearly as bad as some people described it. I actually saw a video. This was actually a few years ago. Someone described it as like a diet withdrawal from opioids. And it's just like, that's an interesting but curiously accurate way of putting it. It's like a diet withdrawal. It's like, for me at least, like it wasn't as bad as coming off of opioids, but it was still pretty bad. The restless legs, that's probably the worst part. Wanting to sleep and not being able to. Keep in mind, during this time, it was summertime, so I was not working, thank goodness for that. But no, just having close support, my wife checking in on me, being in a safe place in my home, and her understanding that, if I need to lay down, I will. Exercising, probably one of the biggest parts, exercising and drinking plenty of water. And really, I mentioned this before, but learning what shame and guilt does. And this has not just been through the withdrawals, but kind of educating myself during that time about what shame and guilt does to you, because it makes you want to isolate even more. And, in order to combat that, you really do need to strengthen your connections with others.
Yeah. Okay. So you made it through that 3.5 weeks, and then you picked up again with the new to you tonics. And then tell me about that. Like, at what point did that become problematic? You said your wife knew?
So, no, during that time again, I started hiding it again. But because I was at work and because I wasn't home 24/7 again, normally during the summertime, I'm finding something else to do work-wise. This last summer, no, it was just, a lot of free time. And that was a problem. But because I was back at work, I feel like I was able to hide it better for those few months that I was for this last fall. And again, it was more sporadic. It wasn't a routine that I had, just the hiding. Anytime I bought it and then consumed it, there would be the feelings of shame and guilt, but I'd want to numb that again with buying more, and she eventually caught on. And again, that's where I just was sick and tired of the hiding, just decided I don't want to be in that position again.
I'm really glad that you're sharing this, because I feel like sometimes in the recovery spaces, there's this narrative that every relapse will get worse and you're going to use more and you're going to have worse withdrawals. Yeah. And I feel like that can be a really harmful narrative because God forbid someone does relapse, it sort of gives them permission to like really go on a like heavy binge.
Yeah.
Where I feel like sometimes relapse is just part of the story and it's part of the journey. And it can be actually a really great learning opportunity to have a relapse and be like, okay, I picked up, I used, I got high, and I'm actually not interested in that. Like, I know where this leads, and I don't need another one, and I don't need to keep going down this road. And I know that wasn't exactly your story, but it sounds like you had a pretty easy relapse, if you will. You know, it doesn't sound like you got too carried away, which is really amazing. But it's a good reminder for everyone that not every story has to look the same, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And, you just saying that reminded me, there was another like short relapse that I had probably a month or two before that, where my wife found out. She just found out that I had still been using. And so that's when I actually texted my younger brother and like, hey, bro, just want to let you know I relapsed today, this and that. And I feel like even the way I texted him was like, shame on me, slap my wrist. No, his response could not have been better. It was something along the lines of, hey, welcome to the club. Like, so what? It just proves that you're human. So, get back up. You got this. And like you just said, learn from it.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like you have a really sweet family.
I do. Again, four brothers who have been nothing but supportive, and an amazing wife who, all of my family, really.
Yeah. So that final relapse, if you will, and the quit, would you say that you had any negative consequences from the use at that point? Like any withdrawal? Did you face any withdrawal?
It's funny because this final one that happened on Thanksgiving, some of the listeners might laugh at me, but I had also been hiding using nicotine pouches. That was almost harder to stop. So that day I quit both kratom and nicotine. The nicotine itself was probably harder to kick. And again, there was just the shame, there was the guilt that I felt. So I almost feel like the nicotine withdrawals overtook the kratom because the kratom hadn't been used every day, more sporadic before that. It was basically the nicotine that I felt withdrawals.
Yeah, nicotine's a tough one. I've kicked it, but it was hard.
Yeah. Hey, good job. For me, it was the oral fixation. It was the pouches. I've never vaped, so it's just that's what it was for me.
I would be grateful if I were you that you kind of escaped some really horrific things that can happen, when you overdo it. So it sounds like you really found out that kratom's just not going to work out for you and you learned your lesson. So
spot on. I have been very lucky. I've enjoyed this podcast so much, and I try not to, compare myself with others, but it's like, oh my goodness, I hear this story and I'm like that people spending well over $100 each day. And oh man, I really did get out of it easily and hope to stay out of it and doing the work in order to do that.
So what does that look like for you today? What does recovery look like for you?
I go to a meeting once a week right now. It's called ARP. So I'm part of the LDS church, and that's what their program's name is. So it's basically 12 steps.
Okay. I didn't know they had their own recovery supports.
Yeah, okay. They just, again, it's basically the 12-step program, but there's just different scriptures implemented, and it's still relevant for everyone. It's incredible. So yeah, I do that once a week. I try to educate myself as much as I can, like the root causes. I do see an amazing therapist every few weeks. And then I actually attended a therapy group, and I highly recommend her, Brene Brown.
I love her, yeah.
That's one thing I'll say, if you're going through a hard time, basically with anything, but mainly addiction, Brene Brown's incredible. Her work is definitely dedicated and will help. But yeah, the group I was in was called Rising Strong, and we met once a week, and it was only an 8-week program, but that definitely helped. Probably, the power of storytelling has really helped. I hear other people's stories, whether it's on the podcast or in a group that I'm in. Now I know that not everyone's a fan of, NA or AA, and, and that's fine. But, I still, for the time being, go to this group, and I relate with others, I connect with others, and it's just been a good way to have people check in on me, or even me checking on others and strengthening those connections.
Have you met anyone else in those groups that had a kratom problem?
No, not a single person. And basically, when I bring it up, in fact, I don't know if there's a single person where I brought it up to them that they're familiar with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What do you attribute that to?
That's a really good question. I really don't know, because, you see, last night we were on our way to play pickleball. There are signs for it everywhere outside of smoke shops, like these big, long green poles that have a flag that says kratom on it. And it's just like, maybe it's just the area that I'm in specifically. No, I feel like I've been doing my part on telling people about it. Like my family definitely knows about it now.
Yeah.
No, anyone outside of my family, it's like, I don't think there's been a single person that is familiar with it.
Interesting. Well, it's definitely, unfortunately, gaining traction. So
yeah,
it's interesting to hear that there's a recovery group out there that most people don't even know about it.
Yeah. First time I heard about it was 2016, and then saw videos about it. And then that's when I came into contact with it. It's at any convenience store, up by the register. Like I said, by the 5 hour, it looks just like the 5 hour energy or whatnot.
Okay. Well, if you had any advice for someone that was quitting kratom, what would you say?
So I'd like to do something, a little different, if I may, but just speaking to the listeners directly. Back in June, 8 months ago, however long it was for me, I was in a really tough spot, and I was still using this stuff, but still listening to the podcast, making these connections, and realizing I'm not alone. If I were to tell you, whoever's listening right now, you're probably thinking of all the different ways to get off this stuff, or different ways to make it easier. And there are supplements you can take. There's plenty things that you can do to help with it, but you just have to accept it and embrace the suck. You have to power through it. There is no growth without discomfort. And there are so many quotes about that. Pick whichever one you want, but you will not grow. You will not get past this when you know that you're going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to have a comfortable time getting through this. So, just embrace it, reach out to someone. Even if that person has never heard of kratom, just accept that it's going to take a little bit. You're definitely not alone.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
You bet.
Any questions that you wish I'd asked you, or anything else that you want to cover?
Let's see. I think if anything, I wanted to really talk about the shame and the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I think that plays a big part of it. And then the root causes. So I never really considered myself having any trauma, but there are probably some instances where, even if it was like an uncomfortable situation that I found myself, whether when I was a young boy or in high school, even, there's definitely things where I still ruminate on. And I think rumination is a big thing too, where we try to numb it, because we just get into that routine of whenever we feel uncomfortable, we want to numb. And then after we numb, we have these feelings of shame and guilt. And that is the routine where it's just easy to get stuck in. Just overcoming shame and guilt, not being so hard on yourself, and just realizing that there's many other people out here in this world that, everyone has their struggles. We just happen to be part of this subgroup.
You mentioned the root cause and understanding it. Would you say that overthinking and rumination would be the root cause for you, or were you able to pinpoint one?
So, like I said at the very beginning, I'm pretty introverted. Even as a teacher, I have had a bad habit, or, maybe it's just something I didn't even realize, of just keeping my feelings to myself and being very self-conscious. So, there's a few instances where I would say something like and embarrass myself, or if I'm not making any sense and people are confused, that would just make me even more self-conscious. And then I just tell myself, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. Like, why would you even say that? Because now they're confused. And so it's just like, I'll just keep my mouth shut and I'll start stockpiling all these emotions and let them build up. And, your body's going to react a certain way. You're going to get stressed out and, you're going to be uncomfortable. So that's going to lead to wanting you to numb. And I think whatever it is, I definitely have, if anything, I've learned to just be more open and reach out to others and just be more vocal in general, because that is something I've always struggled with.
Yeah, those are really important takeaways and ways to know yourself deeper through this. So I always kind of like to look at the silver lining where it's like, it sounds like you know yourself deeper because of the addiction that you went through.
Oh, I've known myself more this year and gotten to know myself better this year than my entire life. Despite this being probably in the last 12 months being the hardest of my life, I got to be careful, but because this has affected loved ones, especially my wife, I am grateful for it. Grateful to go through these struggles, to have gotten to know myself, to get to know others that I love more, and really just trying to tackle this thing of addiction and crushing it by getting to know myself and getting to connect with my loved ones.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
If there was anything else, I'd say just, oh my goodness, connect with people, get out there and connect with them.
Yeah.
I think that's the antidote to addiction.
You're also not alone in that belief. Yeah. Well, Kendall, it was wonderful. It was lovely to talk to you. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure our listeners will get a whole lot out of this interview, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Libby, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.